I never told my parents who I really was. When Grandma left me $4.7 million, they dragged me to court. Then the judge read my file and the room went dead silent. The casket hadn't even touched the ground. I know that sounds like an exaggeration. People say things like that. Dramatic shorthand for quickly or callously. But I mean it literally. The cemetery workers were still adjusting the straps on the lowering device. Nana Rose's white casket suspended 6 inches above the earth when I looked up and saw my mother tilt a small compact mirror toward her face and press her lips together, checking her lipstick. My father stood beside her with his hands clasped in front of him. He glanced at his watch. Then, 40 seconds later, he glanced at it again. Neither of them cried. Not once. Not a tremor of the chin, not a reddening of the eyes. My mother wore black the way she wore everything, as a fashion choice. My father's Italian wool suit probably cost more than the flowers on the casket. I stood in the back, slightly apart from the small cluster of mourners, a few of Nana's neighbors, her book club friends, her Sunday card game rotation, people who actually knew her, people who would actually miss her. I'd driven 4 hours every single Friday for the past 3 years to sit in her kitchen and eat lemon cake and play chess and listen to her talk about her garden and her late husband and the television shows she'd discovered embarrassingly late in life. "Elena," she told me once, studying the board between us with those sharp gray eyes, "you are the only one who treats me like I still have a mind worth arguing with." My parents hadn't visited in 3 years. I know because she told me every Friday, in the careful voice she used when she was trying not to sound hurt. The minister said his final words. Someone sniffled behind me. A bird called from somewhere in the oak trees lining the path. My mother snapped her compact closed. My father checked his watch a third time. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm, hard, and said nothing. I should explain who I am, or rather, who my parents had decided I was. Elena Vance, 34 years old. The family disappointment. No husband, no children, no corporate title to drop at dinner parties. I'd gone into the military at 22, which my father treated as roughly equivalent to announcing I'd joined a traveling circus. I'd been promoted, deployed, moved between postings in ways I couldn't always discuss in detail, and had spent the last 4 years stationed at Fort Belvoir in Virginia as a senior trial counsel with the Judge Advocate General's Corps, the Army's legal division. I prosecuted fraud, felony misconduct, war crimes. I'd tried cases in 3 countries. My parents knew I was in the military. That was the extent of it. I'd stopped volunteering details sometime around the 3rd Thanksgiving, where my father referred to my career as whatever it is Elena does, while my mother nodded sympathetically, as if I'd chosen a life of mild but persistent failure. It was easier to say nothing, and if I'm honest, I'd long since stopped needing their understanding. Nana Rose understood. She'd asked good questions, careful ones, the kind that showed she'd been paying attention. She'd kept her mouth shut about the things I couldn't discuss, and pushed hard on the things I could. She'd been, for most of my adult life, the only person in my family who looked at me and saw something real. When she died on a Tuesday morning in March at the age of 81, I was the one who got the call. I was the one who drove 4 hours to handle the arrangements. I was the one who sat with her attorney, Mr. Gerald Fitch, a small, precise man of 63 who had handled her estate planning for over a decade, and went through her final documents. My parents flew in the morning of the funeral, business class. They did not ask me how I was holding up. The will was read 2 days later, in Gerald Fitch's office on the 4th floor of a building downtown that smelled like old paper and central heating, wood-paneled walls, a clock on the desk, a painting of a lighthouse that had probably been there since 1987. There were 4 of us, Gerald, my parents, and me. My parents sat together in the leather chairs across from Gerald's desk, my mother with her hands folded in her lap, my father leaning slightly forward the way he did when he expected to be pleased. I sat to one side, slightly behind them, with my coffee. Gerald read through the preamble. The legal language, the declarations, the statements confirming Rose Margaret Vance had been of sound mind at the time of signing, which she absolutely was. I'd spoken with her 2 weeks before she died, and she'd beaten me in 22 minutes and informed me I was getting predictable. Then he read the numbers. The estate, the house, the investments, 40 years of careful, quiet accumulation came to approximately $4.7 million, to be distributed in full to her granddaughter, Elena Christine Vance. The room changed. I felt it before I heard it. A shift in the air, a sudden stillness from my father's direction. Then his chair scraped back and he was standing, and his voice came out at a volume entirely inappropriate for a wood-paneled office with a lighthouse painting. "She was senile!" Gerald Fitch did not flinch. He had probably seen this before. "She was manipulated," my father continued, turning to look at me with an expression I can only describe as the specific contempt reserved for something small that has inconvenienced something large. "Elena manipulated her. She's been working on that woman for years. She has no real job, no husband, she barely exists. And now suddenly she gets everything?" My mother rose more slowly. She picked up her purse with the precision of a woman who has rehearsed this gesture. Her eyes, when they met mine, were the temperature of a marble countertop. "We will take you to court," she said. "We will challenge this will, and when we're done, you'll have absolutely nothing." I looked at them both, my father, red-faced and standing, my mother, cold and certain. "Do what you need to do," I said. I meant it. They had no idea what I did for a living, and I had decided, somewhere in the space of the last 90 seconds, that I wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. Not until the timing was exactly right. The lawsuit arrived 3 days later. I was at the kitchen table of Nana's house, my house now, technically, with coffee and my laptop when the email notification came through from Gerald Fitch. 3 claims: undue influence, fraud, and mental incapacity. Their position was that Rose Vance had been a vulnerable elderly woman, isolated and cognitively diminished, and that I had systematically inserted myself into her life to manipulate her estate planning for personal gain. I read the filing twice. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop and typed the name: Operation Inheritance, Old Habit. We name everything. Over the next 2 weeks, I built the folder carefully and methodically, the way I'd been trained to build a prosecution file. Medical records from Nana's primary care physician, Dr. Patricia Okafor, who had seen her quarterly for a decade and had documented consistently that her cognitive function was sharp, engaged, and fully intact. Affidavits from the nursing home administrator who had called Nana's phone number looking for my father over an outstanding debt, a call that Nana had mentioned to me, distressed, during one of our Friday visits. Bank records and public court filings showing my father's $2.1 million in casino-related debt, the second mortgage on their house that had gone into default, and a tax lien that the IRS had filed 18 months ago. I also pulled their attorney's profile. His name was Richard Sterling, Esquire, billboard lawyer, personal injury and civil litigation, 3 highway signs and a late-night television spot. Good at volume, good at intimidation, excellent at targeting people who didn't know the system as well as he did. I noted all of this and filed it accordingly. I did not hire my own attorney. The courthouse morning was clear and cold. I arrived at 8:40 and found a parking spot 2 blocks away and walked in carrying 1 manila folder. My parents arrived in a black car service at 8:55. My mother wore a coat with fur trim. My father wore his Italian suit, different one than the funeral, same energy. Sterling materialized beside them in a charcoal 3-piece with a briefcase that looked like it weighed 12 pounds and contained, presumably, the entirety of their case. He was a large man, Sterling, silver-haired, practiced in the specific art of looking like the most important person in any room. He saw me standing near the courtroom entrance and did a brief professional assessment, the kind that takes about 2 seconds and tells you everything about someone's assumptions. Plain charcoal suit, 1 folder, no counsel table backup, no paralegal, no binders. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who has just realized his morning is going to be very easy. No attorney? He said, tilting his head. No binders. Sweetheart, I'll have you in tears before lunch. I smiled back. It was a smile I'd perfected over years of depositions and court-martial proceedings, the one that gives absolutely nothing away. Looking forward to it, I said pleasantly. Inside, they were extraordinary. I'll give them that. My mother testified first. She'd been transformed. The marble coldness was gone, replaced with something that almost looked like grief. Her voice wavered at precisely the right moments. She described a devoted family, a loving relationship with her mother-in-law, a beautiful woman in her final years who had become, sadly, vulnerable to the influence of a daughter with an ulterior motive. She dabbed at the corner of one eye. No actual tears materialized, but the gesture carried the weight of them. My father testified that I was unstable, that I'd always been a difficult child, disconnected from the family, prone to obsessive behavior. He used the phrase barely tethered to reality with the confidence of a man who'd practiced it. When Sterling asked about the visits, my father explained that they had wanted to see Rose more often. It was I who had made it difficult, who had monopolized her time, who had slowly separated her from her family. He said this clearly, on the record, under oath. I wrote nothing down. Sterling's expert witness was a geriatric psychiatrist named Dr. Howard Bell, who had a comfortable, authoritative manner and a CV full of precisely the right credentials. He explained, at length, the ways in which elderly individuals become susceptible to undue influence, the warning signs of cognitive vulnerability, the patterns of manipulation that often go undetected. He had reviewed Rose Vance's records, and it was his professional opinion that she had demonstrated signs of impaired judgment in her final years. He had never met Nana Rose, not once. I watched him testify and thought about her beating me at chess in 22 minutes. Every time Sterling completed a witness and said, "Your witness, Ms. Vance," I looked up and said the same 2 words. No questions. The first time, Sterling blinked. The second time, he allowed himself a small smile. By the third time, he was performing it for my parents. A slight glance in their direction, a barely perceptible nod. The message was clear. She has nothing. This is already over. My father leaned back in his chair. I could see him from the corner of my eye. He said something to my mother, too quietly for me to catch, but I could read the shape of it. Before lunch, the plaintiff rests, Sterling announced, and there was genuine grandeur in the way he said it. The evidence is overwhelming, Your Honor. This is a clear case of— Thank you, Mr. Sterling, said Judge Holloway. She was 61, Judge Patricia Holloway, with 23 years on the bench and the kind of face that had heard every conceivable variety of human nonsense and maintained, through all of it, an expression of patient, precise attention. Reading glasses on a chain, silver hair pulled back. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses with an expression that was entirely neutral. Ms. Vance, you've chosen to represent yourself, and you've declined to cross-examine. Do you have anything to present? I stood. One document, Your Honor. Sterling actually laughed, out loud, in a courtroom. A short, genuine bark of laughter, the kind that escapes before you can stop it, because the thing in front of you is too absurd to treat with professional gravity. A letter of apology, he suggested. I walked the manila folder to the bailiff without looking at Sterling. The bailiff carried it to Judge Judge Holloway. She opened it and began to read. The courtroom went quiet. Not the ordinary quiet of waiting. Something else. The specific quality of silence that occurs when the temperature of a room changes without warning. I felt it in court-martial proceedings. That moment when something on the record shifts the entire weight of the room. You can't manufacture it. It either happens or it doesn't. Judge Holloway read the first page, then turned to the second. The only sound was the faint movement of paper. "Ms. Vance," she said slowly, and her voice had shifted in some register I recognized. Careful. Recalibrating. "This is a certified service record from the Department of Defense." "Yes, Your Honor." She looked up. "You're currently stationed at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, on leave to handle this matter." Another pause. She looked back at the document. "And your rank is—" She stopped. Read the line again. "Major?" My father made a sound from his chair. A scoff, short and dismissive. The automatic response of a man whose contempt is so well practiced, it fires before his brain catches up. "Major of what?" he said. "The Salvation Army?" Nobody laughed. Judge Holloway's voice had gone very quiet in the way that courtroom voices go quiet when they want to make sure every syllable lands cleanly. "Your JAG?" The air in the room did something. I felt it. A collective, involuntary stillness. The kind that happens when something people weren't expecting becomes suddenly, irreversibly real. Sterling's pen hit the floor. He didn't pick it up. "Senior Trial Counsel," I said. "United States Army Judge Advocate General's Corps. I prosecute war crimes, felony fraud, and treason before military tribunals. The months I disappeared, as my father described it in his testimony, were deployments to Iraq and Germany." My mother's hand found my father's arm. I turned to face them, just for a moment. "I have your tax liens, Dad. $2.1 million in casino debt documented, a second mortgage in default with Citizens Bank as of 14 months ago, a collection agency that called Nana Rose's personal phone number looking for you, which is exactly why she changed her estate plan in 2021, and exactly why she left it to me instead." "Objection," Sterling started, and then seemed to realize in real time the problem with objecting when you've already rested your case. "It establishes motive," I said, "which your own argument invited. You built a case on why I might have a reason to manipulate her. I'm explaining why she had a documented reason to make this choice independently." Judge Holloway had the expression of a woman watching something unfold that she hadn't expected when she arrived this morning. "Mr. Vance," I said, "I'd like to recall you to the stand." My father walked up the way men walk when they've understood, somewhere below language, that the ground has changed under them, and they haven't figured out what to do about it yet. I took 11 minutes. I presented Dr. Okafor's signed affidavit. Quarterly cognitive assessments, consistently normal, final evaluation dated 6 weeks before the most recent will revision. Sharp, engaged, demonstrates no impairment of executive function or decision-making capacity. I entered the nursing home's phone log, the collection call to Nana Rose's room, the date, the duration, the name of the agency. I entered the IRS lien, the court filing on the casino debt, the Citizens Bank default notice, all public record, all time-stamped, all obtained through entirely routine legal research. Then I asked my father, on the record, to explain his testimony that he had wanted to visit more often and had been prevented from doing so. He said yes, he'd testified to that. I produced Nana Rose's personal calendar, a small paper calendar she'd kept on her kitchen counter for 40 years, which I had photographed every single Friday for the past 3 years because she used it to plan our visits and I wanted the record. 36 months. My initials appeared on every single Friday. My parents' initials appeared 0 times. I produced 3 years of her phone records, subpoenaed from the carrier. My number, hundreds of calls. My parents' number, 11, in 3 years, most of them under 2 minutes. "No further questions," I said. My father sat in the chair with his hands in his lap and didn't speak. Judge Holloway's gavel came down with the specific sound of something final. Case dismissed with prejudice. The estate of Rose Margaret Vance is confirmed as specified in the will dated March 3, 2022. Plaintiffs are ordered to bear all costs and court fees. Given the nature of the testimony presented today, I'm referring the transcript to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential perjury and fraudulent litigation charges. She looked at my parents over her glasses for a long moment, then she looked away, the way judges do when they're done with something. My mother came at me in the aisle before I'd finished buttoning my jacket. She grabbed my arm with both hands, and her face had finally lost its composure, not into grief, but into something rawer and less practiced. "We are your parents," she said. It came out almost like a question. I removed her hands from my arm, one at a time, calmly. "And I'm an officer of the court," I said. "Don't touch me." Sterling was at the plaintiff's table, assembling the ruins of his briefcase when I walked past. He'd aged somewhere in the last hour. His silver hair looked less distinguished and more tired. I stopped. I slid a single document across the table toward him. Just one page. He picked it up, read the top line. The color left his face in a specific, visible progression, like watching a time-lapse of something draining. "What is this?" he whispered. "A bar complaint," I said. "Filed this morning with the State Ethics Board. You coached perjured testimony. I have the phone records between you and my father from the 2 weeks before this hearing. Duration, frequency, and, where relevant, content obtained through lawful means I won't specify right now." He stared at the page. "You should have asked who you were suing, Mr. Sterling," I said. "That's really the thing. You saw a woman alone with a folder and decided the morning was going to be easy." I buttoned my jacket. I hope the billboards were worth it. 6 months later, I was back at Fort Belvoir, 4 days out from a pretrial hearing on a a fraud case that had taken 8 months to build when I got an email from Gerald Fitch. The DA's office had filed perjury charges against my father. My mother had retained separate counsel, a fact that spoke volumes about the temperature of their marriage. Sterling's bar complaint had proceeded to formal investigation. He'd voluntarily suspended his practice while it was ongoing, which meant the billboards were still there, but the lights in the office were off. Nana's house, I'd decided, I wouldn't sell. I'd had the kitchen repainted the same yellow she'd always kept it. I'd found a woman from her book club, a retired teacher named Dorothy, who'd been the one openly crying at the funeral, who was willing to maintain the garden through the winter. There's a chessboard set up on the kitchen table, same one we always used. I leave it mid-game the way she used to when I had to leave on Friday evenings. A signal, she said, that the game wasn't finished. I know what she would say about all of it. She'd hear the whole story and then sit back and study the board with those gray eyes and let a silence settle, and then she'd make her move, and she'd say, Elena, they saw what they expected to see. That's always been their only mistake. Check.